Hello everybody, I am Glen Fought. I am from Vicksburg, Mississippi, born and raised here. I've been away for years and moved back home a few years ago. And this is my beloved hometown.
That's great.
Okay, well, first place, I'm a little bit, I guess, a different position. I told somebody, I said, I literally have a lifelong interest in ivory bills because the first thing, when I was probably 3 or 4 years old here in Vicksburg, my dad told me the story. When he was about 12 years old, they moved to a log camp outside of Louisiana. It was in Singer Game Reserve, on a large tract of virgin timber then owned by Singer Sewing Machine Company. And anyway, his dad drove a train, short track train, hauling logs out of the woods to the paper mill. And Dad told me some of the first things I remember when I was probably 3 or 4 years old was Dad telling me about when they moved to the log camp after his mother died, and it was still a lot of virgin timber there. And he said when they moved there, this is in the early 40s, probably 1940, they had southern red wolves still in the area, they had black bear, they had cougar, and some ivory billed woodpeckers still left in that area. It was pristine area of woods that they went in and started clear cutting. And so that was some of the earliest stories. Dad told me the story, and I remembered it from one of my earliest memories of, he said that they happened to be in the right place at the right time. And there was a game warden that was the dad of his closest friend. They called him, it was Jesse Laird, they called him Mr. Jesse, excuse me, and Mr. Jesse happened to stop. They were on the bridge throwing rocks into the stream, he and his younger brother Bob, and introduced him to this man that was in his late 20s then. He said, this is Don Eckelberry. He's a bird painter. And Don has been commissioned by the Audubon Society to come down here and do sketches of this rare bird. He said it may be the only one left on earth, Ivory Billed Woodpecker. And would you boys like to go with him? Now, y'all have to be real quiet. And Dad said Don had evidently been to the nest tree before, the roost tree, and they said they walked across the woods with Don Eckelberry, and Don didn't have a camera, just had his sketch pad. And anyway, they walked to the area, sat down on a log, and they waited. And it was in spring of 1942. And they said they waited for an hour or so, and just before dark, the female ivory bill came in and landed on the tree and then flew off and then came back and landed again. And he said he was doing sketches just as fast as he could sketch. And anyway, got sketches over, and then she went to bed for the night. And a little side note to that, they said while they were waiting on her, he was doing sketches of the trees around, and he did sketches of his younger brother Bob, which was like 4 years younger. And he said he was the fastest we've ever seen in doing sketches. He was really good. And later, somebody asked what happened to those sketches. He said, well, Bob was living with some people, renting from some people, and they got hot at him about something, and they took all the sketches and threw them in the fire and burned them up. Damn. And so that's what happened to the other sketches that he did that day. But anyway, Dad said we weren't familiar at that point with ivory bill, but he said I think we had actually seen them around the cabin that we lived in before this. But anyway, he said I think we realized, they told us, he said this may be the last of these birds on earth. And he said, I think we realized, he said, as we left that day, he said, I remember feeling sad, thinking, can you imagine if you're the only person or whatever of your kind left on earth? And he said, as we left there, he said, Bob and I said, well, good night. It was right before dark. He said, good night, Miss Peckerwood. And he said, I said it, Bob said it, and he said, I think Don said the same thing. Well, good night, Miss Peckerwood. And he said Don left shortly after that. I think he stayed around for maybe a week or so. But he said, that's the one time we saw it. And he said, that's stuck with me my whole life. But that was one of the first stories that I remember hearing, and I can literally say I've had a lifelong interest in ivory billed woodpeckers. I've written about this a couple of times online, and I told it exactly like it was. And this is probably a lot of ivory bill encounters, or what people think they might be ivory bill encounters, are probably like this. It's, you go, did I actually see that? Was this something I dreamed? Or you're trying to remember something that happened. In my case, this is almost 60 years ago. Yeah, about 60 years ago. It's hard to remember the details, but Dad was in a hunting club south of Vicksburg, between Vicksburg and Port Gibson, Mississippi, called Po' Boy, not Poor Boy, but Po' Boy Hunting Club. And started taking me hunting with him when I was probably 10 years old, and was on not a tree stand, but what they call a stand. They would hunt him with dogs, and he said, I had a 20 gauge shotgun, and he said, you stay right here and just listen for the dogs, and when you hear them, you know, be ready for watching deer come by. And I have this memory, and I wondered about it later. I said, is that something that actually happened? I think it happened, but was standing there, and I know at that age knew really well what a pileated woodpecker looked like. We called them Indian hens, but I was very familiar with them. I could take a crow call and call them on the tree above me, do the sound just exactly like them. But I had this memory of standing there and was looking toward the east. There was a huge beech tree, and for just a matter of probably 3 seconds, this massive, much bigger bird landed on the beech tree and was there for a second and flew off, and another one right behind it. And I remember thinking, that is the biggest Indian hen, pileated, that I've ever seen in my life, and something just didn't look right about it. And the other was the same way. And I wondered, I said, I have no idea if it was or not, but I wondered if it was a male and then a female ivory bill that were going through that area. This was just across the river, and probably, as the ivory bill flies, probably within 30 miles of Singer Tract, where the last reported sighting was in 1942. And this would have been 42, this would have been probably in 64. So we're talking about 12 years, like 18 years later, less than 20 years later. And if somebody said, did you see one? I said, I told you what I saw, I don't know, but I've always wondered. But I did know the difference in a pileated and an ivory bill. And kind of the neat thing about it is a mystery. It's like, did I see that? I don't know. I'll never know, but I'll always wonder. I would say this, because of the stories that I heard when I was a kid, I doubt if anybody's any more hopeful than I am. I hope it does. It's amazing to me in the 80 years now, more than 80 years since then, that there's not been a definitive photo taken that you can look at and say, yeah, that's one, they're still there. But I told somebody, it's a pretty serious photographer, and there's a lot of, quote, common birds that I don't have a photo of because I hadn't seen certain ones in more than 20 years. And you can't get a photo of something you don't see. So as from what I've read about some of the potential areas in Texas and Louisiana and Florida and other places, Alabama, that are prime habitat, as wild as some of that area is and as inaccessible as a lot of it is, I can truthfully understand they could be out there and nobody would have seen them.